The Starlight barking. Chapter 3. Now that they could swoosh, Pongo and Mrs. got back to Hell Hall in a couple of minutes, remembering how light they had felt when running to the farm. Pongo guessed they had almost swooshed by instinct, and he was annoyed with himself for needing to be taught by Cadpig. He must be more alert, and he must certainly find Mr. Dearly's dictionary and learn what metaphysical meant. Mrs. was happy to discover that she could swoosh sitting, as well as on 4 legs. It would make a restful change on the long journey to London. She then became worried because they wouldn't have their collars on, as they couldn't put them on for themselves. Suppose we meet a policeman? All the policemen will be asleep, Pongo reminded her. Well, that's something to be thankful for. As the gates of Hell Hall swung open to let them in, they saw that the front lawn was packed with Dalmatians. Prince hurried forward to say, "They all woke up soon after you left," I explained, "and there was no panic whatsoever. None of them are hungry, but they seem perfectly well, and more peaceful than usual." "So I see," said Pongo, astonished. At this time of the morning the Dearly Dalmatians were usually at their most boisterous, and there was keen competition for the water chute, seesaw and swings. Today only the younger dogs were playing. The elder dog sat still, looking expectant but calm. Pongo congratulated Prince on the way he had handled things. "Perdita helped, of course," said Prince. The nursing mothers were a little worried because their puppies had no appetite, but Perdita soothed them, "And every pup will start the emergency spotlessly clean." Under a shady tree, Perdita could be seen puppy washing. "Naturally, everyone's eager for news," Prince went on, "but I've asked them not to rush you." Pongo, gazing at the sunny, dog-filled lawn, disliked disturbing so much peace, but it had to be done. He stepped forward between Mrs. and Prince, called all dogs to attention, and told them what he had learned from Cadpig. When he described swooshing there was a ripple of movement. Many dogs wanted to try it, but Pongo restrained them. "A swooshing class will be held later," he said firmly. "Now we have to decide who's coming to London. Mothers with puppies must, of course, stay here, and fathers of puppies must stay and guard their families. All other dogs are free to volunteer. I'd like a show of tails." Instantly, the whole lawn seethed with wildly wagging tails. Thank you," said Pongo, "but I mustn't take so many." He turned to Prince. "I think we'd better discuss it while Mrs. holds a swooshing class in the U-Walk, I suggest. That's long enough for them to practice speed." The U-Walk was a stretch of grass between 2 tall yew hedges. Mrs., feeling important, led the way there. Every dog except Pongo and Prince went with her. Even the nursing mothers took their puppies to watch. Pongo then asked Prince if he would stay and guard the Dearlys. "I shan't feel at ease unless you do. And of course Perdita must stay with you, and as many dogs as you think are needed here." Prince would have liked to go to London, but he knew where his duty lay, as he and Perdita were half owners of the Dearlys. He also knew that Perdita was a home-loving dog, having been, during a tragic period of her youth, homeless. So he agreed to stay and said Pongo must take all the dogs he wished. "All my own family will want to come," said Pongo. "What a blessing that Lucky's chosen a wife as bright as he is. They'll be a great help. So will Patch, and he's longing to see Cadpig." Patch had never married. He had found out that, for the good of the Dalmatian breed, he ought not to hand on his patched ear, but he had not been unhappy. He had become a sort of uncle dog, and was tremendously popular with puppies. He was always ready to play with them, and he loved them all. But the great love of his life was his sister, Cadpig, of whom he had taken such care when she was a tiny, weak puppy. He was proud of her fame, but he had never ceased to miss her. Pongo went on, "I wonder if I can risk taking Roly Poly." The fat pup who had had so many accidents was now a fat dog who still had accidents, and as he was larger, they were larger. At that very moment there was a roar of laughter from the dogs in the U-Walk, and Mrs. was heard saying, "Oh dear, have you hurt yourself, Roly? You're not supposed to swoosh through things." "We'd better see what's happening," said Pongo. They found that Roly Poly hadn't done himself any harm, though he hadn't done a yew-hedge any good. Pongo whispered to Mrs. "I hardly feel it will be safe to take Roly with us." "Neither will it be safe to leave him behind," said Mrs. "And I'd rather know the worst about him than just imagine the worst, and his feelings would be terribly hurt if we didn't take him." "I'm afraid some dogs are bound to have their feelings hurt." But things didn't turn out that way. It was taken for granted that Pongo would want his own family, and when he and Prince divided the remainder up, like choosing sides in a game, no married couples were separated. The ones who were to remain behind at once took to the idea of guarding the Dearlys and defending Hell Hall, though no one knew what from. It was all part of the perfect behavior of all dogs on that remarkable morning. None of the dogs had any difficulty in learning to swoosh, but Pongo wanted to be sure that all the dogs coming to London were strong swooshers, so he left them to practice while he and Mrs. took a last look at their pets. First they ran up to the big, comfortable attic which was shared by the nannies. Nanny Cook, in a frilly nightgown, slept with her mouth open. Nanny Butler, in pajamas, slept with her mouth firmly shut. They both looked comfortable and splendidly healthy. "How kind they've always been to us," said Mrs. "Do you remember that night when they helped to wash the soot off us and all the puppies?" Pongo said. "That was when we were at the end of an adventure. Now we're at the beginning of one." "Well, thank goodness this one can't have anything to do with Cruella de Vil," said Mrs. "As we know she had to leave England." But Pongo broke off in time. Some months earlier he had heard the Dearlys saying that Cruella had come back. He had kept this from Mrs. at the time, and he would go on keeping it from her. And anyway, how could Cruella have anything to do with this mysterious sleeping? They ran down to the Dearlys' bedroom. Nothing had changed. The Dearlys still smiled in their sleep. The white cats, if not actually smiling, were looking as blissful as sleeping cats can. Mrs. gave her basket a loving look, then suddenly cried, "Pongo, I've just remembered. Last night I had an important dream." As a rule, Mrs. dreamt about food. In good dreams, jam tarts grew on trees and chocolate drops came down like rain, and so on. In bad dreams food was often behind glass or in tins that couldn't be opened. But this last dream was different from any dream she had ever had before, and she wasn't sure if it was good or bad. She only knew it was important. "There was a dazzling bright light," she told Pongo, "and oh dear, I can't remember anymore." "Perhaps it will come back to you," said Pongo, though he rather hoped it wouldn't. He enjoyed telling his own dreams, but wasn't fond of listening to other people's. "I think we should start now, my dear." So they kissed the Dearlys, and looked very kindly at the cats, and Mrs. told her basket she would soon be home. She did this silently because Pongo would have laughed at her for talking to her basket, and then they ran downstairs. When they reached the hall, Pongo said, "Let's go into Mr. Dearly's study. I want to find out the meaning of that strange word Cadpig used, metaphysical. It'll be in that dictionary." Pongo was a splendid reader. How often had he blessed those alphabet blocks he had played with as a pup, but he had never looked up a word in the dictionary, and he wasn't sure on which shelf the dictionary was kept. Also, the room was only dimly lit because the curtains were still drawn, but as he peered around, a shaft of sunlight came between the curtains. Did they draw aside just a little to let it in? And it shone full on a dark blue book, which had dictionary in gold letters on its back. He nosed it from the shelf and it slid gently to the floor, where it fell open. The bright shaft of sunlight shone on it. "I do call that civil," said Mrs. "Bless me, it's opened at the very word I want," said Pongo. Pongo found the words which explained metaphysical puzzling as the word itself, but when he read them aloud to Mrs. she understood two of them: visionary and supernatural. She said visionary was when you imagine things, and supernatural must mean extra specially natural, or perhaps more than natural, said Pongo. "And I see that metaphysics has something to do with the mind," Mrs. said. "I think metaphysical means magic, a kind of magic that comes from our own minds. That's why we're able to open doors today and talk direct to Cadpig and Swoosh." "Oh Pongo, I like metaphysical." "I don't think I do," said Pongo. "I don't think I like things I don't understand." "That's because you have such a splendid brain. My brain understands so little that it loves things it's not supposed to understand. Anyway, I've taken to metaphysical." Pongo never thought Mrs. as silly as she thought herself, and he greatly depended on her instincts. He was a clever dog and he knew it, but he also knew that the cleverer he got, the less help he got from his instincts. So he was happy that he could rely on what his dear wife often called her feelings, and if she was in favor of metaphysical he would do his best to be too. He tried to put the dictionary back on its shelf, but could not manage it. Why? When this morning he could do so many things not usually possible. "It's because you don't need to," said Mrs. "If you did, I'm sure metaphysical would help. The book will be quite safe on the floor, not if any puppies get in here." So Mrs. pushed the book under the sofa with her nose and said, "No puppy will find it there. And when we come back, and Mr. Dearly's awake, we'll show him where his dictionary is." But would they ever come back? Would Mr. Dearly ever wake? Pongo tried to turn these fears out of his mind. Anyway, he must hide them from Mrs. He said briskly, "Now we must hurry." They ran out into the sunny garden.